is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 657. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how you doing, bud?
Oh, I'm all right. You know, things are going.
How are things? How's everything in Colorado, in the Mile High City?
Hot. It's been pretty hot lately, so.
Nice. Yeah, we finally got summer over here, too. Show this week. So, we've been kind of putting it off or maybe trying to avoid it. It would be one way to put it. But the set releases this time around are kind of weird. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And we are going to be doing a set primer for Alchemy Horizons Baldur's Gate, like an Alchemy draft primer, basically. So we're going to be going over this. This is a set that's going to be on Arena leading up all the way to September when we get Dominaria United. So this is what people are going to be playing. We're going to talk about it. We're going to go big picture with it and then try to drill down a bit into some of the strategies and stuff so that you can have an overall approach and an idea for what this set is about and what it's trying to do when you sit down to do your drafts of it. Before we get into our main topic, though, let's talk about our sponsors, channelfireball.com. Make sure you check them out for all things Magic related. That's right. Anything you need Magic, you can find it at the CFB Marketplace. That's the place to go for singles. You can get sealed product there. You can even get supplies and stuff like that. And it's pretty cool. It lets you comparison shop. If you're a seller of Magic singles, you can sign up and be on the CFB Marketplace. And then when people search there, well, guess what happens? Your shop shows up alongside other ones with the inventory that you have for the thing that they search, as well as the price, shipping times, reviews, all that kind of stuff. And as a consumer, this is all beneficial to you because you get to choose the best of whatever it is that you prioritize. If it's just lowest price, you get to go with that. If it's fastest shipping, you can go with that. And you get to shop around and have access to an even bigger selection than before. If you do end up picking up anything over at CFB, if you use the affiliate code LR at checkout, it helps out the show and we do appreciate it. And our other sponsor, FTX, that's a place to manage all of your digital assets. If you've got anything that you want to do in that space, FTX is the safe, regulated place to do so. Here in the United States, it's ftx.us. Outside is ftx.com. And make sure that you educate yourself for anything investment related before doing so. You're going to want to consult a professional. But when you feel that you're ready, FTX is the place to go, and we highly recommend them. The show is also brought to you by you via the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources for information there. Luis, do we want to do a Crack-a-Pack at some point here? I don't think leading with it makes a lot of sense, but would we like to do one a little bit later in the show?
Yeah, we'll do one after we talk about the archetypes.
Okay, cool. Then I am going to dive us right into the main topic here. To make sure that we have enough time to cover the things that we want to talk about. So, what is Alchemy Horizons Baldur's Gate? It is a digital-only release that comes out alongside, you may have heard of this one, it's called Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. Now, that's a paper release as well. And that's also a draftable set. And if you've heard anything about it, though, that's kind of a crazy draft format, where they've warped the rules of many of the things that you take for granted in draft, like how many cards you take from each pack, how many cards you play, needing a commander, and also being designed for playing multiplayer. That is not the case for Alchemy Horizons Baldur's Gate. That is digital only, and you draft it just like anything else. It's 40 card decks, one pick per pack, etc. It uses cards from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate, with some cards being rebalanced for 1v1 play, meaning that if a card was designed for multiplayer play, it usually is more expensive and does more splashy, bigger things. And so they've said, well, if we're going to put some of these cards into packs that were meant to be played in normal 1v1 Magic, we need to adjust them. So they're going to rebalance a few of those. Plus, this is the big hitter, they've added 81 brand new digital only cards. Now, some uncommons and commons are from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. So just straight up AFR cards you'll find in here. And the rebalance cards are from both Commander Legends as well as Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. And then they've also got a new category called Reimagined cards that have the same art as the card that they're based on, but have a new card name and rules text. And these are cards that exist in Commander Legends, but that they wanted to bring over, but that they just said, well, let's just redesign it entirely for this. So they kind of exist in two places with the same artwork, but with everything else different. First off, the big picture here, Luis, right, is that we are talking a digital set. And whenever you see alchemy put into the name of the set particularly, but used to describe it at all, that makes me think of cards that are digital only in design, meaning that they do things that you couldn't do in paper.
Yeah, and I think that's part of where, at least for me, my initial hesitance to cover the set which was, oh, it's a digital only release. I'm used to we cover paper, the releases that are both paper and digital, right? That's been basically every set that we've covered. But as it turns out, this is going to be one of the draft formats on Arena for the next couple months. We're not getting a new release in that time. So it makes perfect sense to cover it, even if the setting was a little bit different than before. And I know, for example, we didn't really go deep on New Capenna Alchemy, right? Alchemy, New Capenna, whatever it was. And this is a little different because this is, again, front and center in a way that wasn't. And there's no paper set coming out. So totally fine covering it. I obviously went in with a little bit of hesitance because I thought before and still think that Alchemy has been kind of a demonstration of what not to do design wise. So I'm, I've got my quabbles with some of the decisions made here, but I'm now 4.5 drafts in, and my opinion is overall positive of the set. I think that it's fine. I anticipate doing more drafts, and I'm happy to cover it. This is, when I mentioned on Twitter that we were going to cover the set, we had people, so I'm oh, begrudgingly, or, oh, you're doing it for the bucks or whatever. And it's just no, we're doing it because this is what the listeners are going to be playing. Once we kind of realized, oh, this is actually going to be kind of the main set that a lot of our listeners are going to play. Yeah, that made me want to cover it because our goal here is to give you actionable advice, right. And we can do that. So very happy to continue providing that. My opinion on a set isn't if a paper set comes out that I don't like, it's not that we don't cover it. We maybe do fewer episodes on it, right? You can look at some of the sets where we had a lot more episodes than others, but that doesn't mean we're going to just skip a set because we don't like it. That was never what it was about. I just didn't realize the importance of the set, partially because previous sets like this didn't make the biggest impact. We didn't hear a lot of people asking for it.
Yeah. And, there's these things come up where there's supplemental products, things like Double Masters, for example. Interesting, cool set. But we have to look at our audience in a realistic setting and say, how many people in our audience are going to draft Double Masters? It's a decent amount. How often? Probably once, right? It's expensive. It's Magic Online only if you're doing it online. And, we have to be cognizant of that. And normally what would happen is we may be able to do a set primer for Double Masters or something like that, but the next set would be already ramping up. And so we want to do our sunset show to give the prior set its due respect and then move on to the next real air quote set that we know the vast majority of our audience would be drafting. And when we first saw this Alchemy Horizons thing, it felt like just some random supplemental product. But the difference is that there is no proper summer release like we would normally get. And what that means is September is the next one with Dominaria United. And then the next set comes out a few months after that. They're really bunched up later this year. I'm not really sure why. I don't know if that's a thing now or what. But, if you remember, that happened this last year as well, where it felt like we only got the set for the last, the prior set for just a little while. And then it was gone already because the next set came out. And that's kind of what we're going to have here as well. And so, yeah, as Louis said, we know that you're going to be drafting this. This is going to be the main thing on Arena. So we're going to do our set primer here. Now, the way we're going to break this down is in two broad strokes categories. One of them are the mechanics. And we normally don't have to go quite as deep on mechanics, but we are going to go deep on these mechanics because they are primarily alchemy based, meaning digital only, meaning weird and different than what you might be used to, not some sort of twisted version of kicker or something. These are totally different things than you may have experienced. And if you're going to be drafting it, you're going to need to know it. And then the other side is we're going to go over the archetypes in broad strokes, talk about some cards within them, and then what they're trying to do, so that if you sit down and you pick up a sweet gold bomb or something that hey, this is kind of the direction that this deck wants to lean, and you can start picking up cards that help support that. So that's how we're going to break it down, and we'll sneak a Crack-a-Pack in here at some point in as well, as long as we don't forget. So I'm going to go over all of the mechanics in the set, and Luis, I want you to give not only supporting information just about how things might work or whatever, but also Look, I'm going to tee you up. I want to know what you think about these mechanics from a design perspective too, because we're not going to do a sunset show on this one, so I'm not really going to get a chance to pick your brain about kind of these things. And I want to hear what you have to say. So the first one up is Conjure. And what Conjure does is it creates new cards that weren't in your deck or sideboard originally, but now are just treated as cards. So if it says Conjure a something, it can create new cards that didn't exist. And, this is obviously something that's impossible for real life. We do have tokens that we can make to create new things on the battlefield that didn't exist before. But how do you create a new card in somebody's deck or hand or graveyard or library or whatever? You can't, right? We don't have the ability to do that freely, especially from a relatively large card pool, and Conjure allows you to do that.
I award them no points or demerits for Conjure because this is the basically level 1 digital mechanic. It's good. Like, it is a good mechanic. Hearthstone's been doing it for 10 years. Mm-hmm. Eternal. We did that very shortly thereafter, and it makes a ton of sense. I mean, this is just a natural place to go, and it plays well. I like Conjure cards. I think that conjuring cards into your hand, whether they be in Magic created cards like you can get Lightning Bolt or Naturalize, right? Like copies of real cards that exist, mm-hmm. or cards that didn't exist before. Totally fine either way. Okay.
So that's one that you'll see. Another one is called Perpetually. And Perpetually causes effects and counters on a card to apply permanently for the rest of the game, regardless of which zone or zones that card goes into.
Again, this is just straight up what you do with digital mechanics.
So this is bread and butter digital mechanics.
Yeah. You modify things permanently. And in fact, like, if Magic was a digital game first, they would just always naturally do this because this, again, plays very well. You can Giant Growth temporary give something +3/+3, or you can, instead of putting an aura on something that falls off if it's bounced or flickered, you just, Stone Skin, give a creature +0/+4 permanently. And mm-hmm. then no matter where that creature is, it's always got +0/+4. And you can even staple other text on it, whether it's like a keyword or haste, or in some cases you could make an ETB, whatever you wanted to do. Again, totally fine. This is a good mechanic, but so level 1 that I don't think you get like points for using it. You just should use it.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, is this accurate? How I'm interpreting what you're saying is basically that it's like a limitation of paper Magic that you don't get to do this. So this is sort of just like, this is how people would expect it to go anyway. Yep. I mean, you would get docked points for not using this, but you don't get points for using it. It is just kind of best practices when it comes to making a digital set. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Next, it's like if you were to record a podcast not wearing headphones, right? You don't get points for it, but you definitely get docked points. Dude, I just checked to make sure you had yours on because you didn't make a big show about like me asking you to put your headphones on. Perfect example. Oh, wow, very nice. The next mechanic is called Seek. And when you seek, the game will automatically choose a random card meeting the criteria outlined from the library or wherever and put it into your hand. This is fine. This is also a decent mechanic. Like, it's a way to, draw your, it's kind of like you could have draw your top creature card or, whatever it is, or whatever classification you want. You could draw it with your deck using Seek, and Seek is, I think, a totally fine mechanic. This one, I don't think is fantastic because it's a little weird for people coming from a Magic background to be like, oh, okay, I draw one of these at random, but from this subset. Mm-hmm. But it's not a bad mechanic. Again, it's fine. Like, seeking a creature that costs 3 or less, like on one of the cards is like Goblin Trap Finder. It plays pretty well. Like, you if you want to work hard, especially in Constructed, you could make Seek deterministic in some cases, right? Like, you could
only play one creature, and then all your seek for creature cards get the same thing. But in limited, it plays well because it's like seek a non-land card, what all the gates have. It just means you're drawing a card and it's not a land, which is exactly what you want at that time. So again, this is what I consider like kind of a neutral mechanic where it's good to use, but it is not, kind of blowing your mind.
Okay, and I'll read that Goblin Trap Finder card just as an example, because it actually includes two of the mechanics that we've just talked about. So it's red for a 1/1 goblin. It's uncommon. It says when it dies, seek a creature card with mana value 3 or less. And I'll tell you, I am one of the people that you just mentioned where that doesn't, like, my brain doesn't go, okay, I automatically know what I'm going to do there. I'm like, I do what? Seek it? What do I do to seek it? Like, it almost feels like I'm supposed to do something.
It's a bit of an action word for that. Yeah.
Right. But what it means is that I'll get a card from my library with a mana value 3 or less, and it'll come into my hand. Right? It's just a real card from my life. Like, it's not a made up, new item thing. It just comes in. So I get that. And then it says that card perpetually, so there's that word, gains haste. This spell costs 2 less to cast. And at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice this creature. So it adds all of that text to the card that I seeked from my library into my hand. So that's a way that you can see, multiple of these mechanics kind of working together. The next one is one that we have had before, but I'll go over it. It's Spellbook. This lets you access a card from outside the game. So not on the battlefield, not in your library, their library, nowhere, completely outside the game, specifically a subset of 15 cards that usually relate to the effect. 3 of the 15 cards from the card Spellbook will appear, and you'll get to draft one of them.
So Spellbook is one of those mechanics which I think has, in some ways, good intentions, but I think is poorly implemented and has some risks to it. So here's my issue with it. Here's the upside. The upside is it's cool. You get to play like Wizard's Apprentice gets to draft a card from its Spellbook. You get access to, 3, 5, 7, 9, whatever different cards, or like the Cursebound Witch that we saw in a previous Alchemy set. When it dies, you get to draft a card from its Spellbook, so you get presented with 3 cards from its Spellbook of 7 cards or what have you, and you get to pick one. The problem I have is in a game like Magic and the way it's been implemented, when your Cursebound Witch dies, you get a card in your hand. I don't know what that card is. I'm actually obliged, if I want to try to win the game, like if I want to give myself the best chance, to go look at the Spellbook and try to figure out which of the 15 cards they have or could have. Well, they could have any of them. You don't know which one they have. But some of these Spellbooks have like pretty important interactive cards. You need to know, like, oh man, if they got, the 7 mana curse from Amonkhet that makes me sack Curse of Cruel Realities or whatever, like that makes me sack every turn, like I really need to make sure I've got a disenchant. So I've got to like now think about that, or if they've got an interactive, like an instant spell of some kind, I now have to like look at their Spellbook, which is not the easiest thing in the world to look at, especially when the rope's going, and figure out how I should react to that information, or even during a draft when it's like, all right, I got to look through this Spellbook, and that's like the first card I'm looking at in a pack. I have to try to look through the Spellbook to see if this card's any good. I think that's a kind of unreasonable burden to put on the opponent. And I don't love cards like this. And like Hearthstone does Discover, for example, right? So Discover is you get a choice of 3 cards, and they'll say something like discover a minion, or discover a spell, or even more narrow. But defining the entire range and having that range still be pretty big, and then it could be one of those cards, and it's exactly one of those cards. I don't think that leads to a great play experience. I do not. And this is what, when we get to Specialized, this is part of the problem there too. So
yeah,
I think Spellbook there's something there, but I much prefer either defining it exactly like conjure a lightning bolt. You just know they have a lightning bolt. That's fine. Space up. Or something like the Hearthstone's Discover, where it's like kind of at random of a set, but the set's too big for you to be like, all right, I got to play around this. But if you know exactly they could have one of 15 cards, you now have to think about what all those 15 cards do. If it could be one of 100 cards, you're not going to bother. That doesn't, no point in doing that. If it's exactly one card, you know what it is. One of like 15 or one of 10 is in some ways the worst of the worlds.
Yeah. It also you have to know all of them, even though they only get a shot at 3 out of the whatever. An example from the set is called Follow the Tracks. And again, they will, you're obviously.
Well, this one I like, actually.
Yeah, you're combining these a lot. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. So this is 2 and a green for a sorcery at common. Conjure a card of your choice from Follow the Track spellbook onto the battlefield. So then you go, okay, well, what's the spellbook? Spellbook are 5 different lands. So there's one for each color, normal color, and they're gates. And it says they need to be tapped, and you can pay 3 and a color of them to tap it and seek a non-land card and activate it only once. And you can tap it to add black. So it's pretty cool. I mean, these are really neat gates, and you can, you get them on the battlefield. You don't have to sacrifice them. You can only do them once. Really neat little design space there. And that one, since all the cards are basically the same, that makes it a lot less of a burden on the opponent, right?
Yeah. And I mean, this one's very simple. It's just a rampant growth for a gate, and you get to choose which gate, and you don't have to have it in your deck. I think this is a perfect way to use a spellbook.
Right. But if I go to a rare one, which is, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Oya Minartok, Polar Werebear.
This is the polar bear? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's 2 GG for a 4/5 legendary giant bear. It has hexproof if hasn't been dealt damage yet. It deals combat damage to a player. You sacrifice or you create a food token, and you can pay blue and sack a food to draft a card from its spellbook. When you do, you add triple blue, and you can spend this mana only to cast blue creature cards. So you're like, okay, cool. What's the blue spellbook? Well, there's 15 blue creatures. I'm not going to read the text on them, but they're all cards that you may recognize. Cards like Archipelagor, Junkwinder, Moat Piranhas, Mystic Skyfish.
They're all like fish or sea monsters.
But I mean, I did mention Moat Piranhas. That's 2 mana. There's Pursued Whale. That's 7 mana, right? Sea Dasher Octopus has flash. Ruin Crab is a mill card. Like, what are we, Voracious Great Shark, which is just kind of a bomb.
I mean, part of this is the card choices. If this was all like 7 mana Leviathans, it'd be a burden, but it wouldn't be the worst. But this does include, like you mentioned, Voracious Great Shark. It has flash, and Pouncing Shore Shark also flash. So and they're very interactive. So when your opponent does this, like, yeah, sure, there's some element of like, oh, they drafted a card from the spellbook and they passed with 5 mana up. Look at the spellbook, find the Voracious Great Shark or the Pouncing Shore Shark, and be like, okay, I guess it's probably one of those because they didn't spend their mana. I should play around that. But part of what's so sick about this card is if you play around Voracious Great Shark by not doing anything, and they chose Pouncing Shore Shark and they flash it in and bounce your creature on a turn, way worse for you. So worse. It gets back to the old, like, you can't play around either of those cards, and you're going to feel dumb when you play into the wrong one. And that's kind of exactly what I'm talking about with spellbooks. Right.
And, also, like, this might be fun for you and I. We've played all these sets. I know what Nezahal does. I know what Voracious Great Shark does. Imagine if you started last year.
Right.
Right? Like, if you didn't play Ikoria, you don't know what Sea Dasher Octopus does, what Voracious Great Shark does, what Pouncing Shore Shark does. And even if you did, you might be like, that was 3 years ago. What do those stupid cards do again? And I mean, I don't want to have to read all this stuff. The example
I mean, you just said the tagline for Alchemy Baldur's Gate. I don't want to have to read all that stuff. That is my problem with the set. It's not that these things are all terrible designs. Some of them I don't think are good, but like, it's just this like wall of text. Like, look.
Wait till we get to the next mechanic.
Let's just jump into Specialized.
Okay, because I'll read it. I did want to make one more point though to help back up what you're saying though. And it's one that Ryan made on the show, Ryan Spain, who I started Limited Resources with all those years ago. And it was a thing that was, he's a game designer as well. And he taught me something really valuable. And it was when I first started drafting on Magic Online, they had a functionality where you could watch the replay. So this was in pod drafting. They didn't have leagues yet. And what you could do is you could watch the replay of the match that your now current opponent just played prior. Okay. They had that set up as part of the functionality. So you think, well, that's pretty cool, because then what I can do is I see who I'm matched up against. I go watch their prior match, and now I can see what their deck is, right? I could get up to 3 games worth of information. If I wanted, I could write down every card that I saw, and I might get 17 of their 23 spells written down before I even sit across from them. I might see 3 combat tricks and an instant speed removal spell that I know I need to play around. And I'm like, as a min-maxer, I'm thinking, well, this is great. And he said he wishes that they would shut that off. And I was like, why? Like, that's great information that you're getting there. He's like, because I feel like I have to go watch it every time, and I'd rather just play against my opponent, right? And half the time in those days, you would get matched up against somebody, and 4 minutes into their clock, they would show up. And the reason wasn't because they were getting a sandwich, it was because they were watching your replay. And Ryan was like, I don't want to feel compelled to have to do this to play up to my potential. Right. And that's what this makes me feel. If somebody casts a spell book, I'm just like, oh my God, I don't want to have to look at this and try to narrow down and get refreshed on what all of these cards do. And this is me. I covered these sets at PTs here on the podcast. I know these cards. I don't even want to think it would be like to be somebody who started a year and a half ago, and just be like, I am not going to read 15 cards worth of rare text just to try to get some small edge. But that's why he said they did, by the way, eventually shut it off. But that was a big learning moment for me, because I was like, oh, you can give people too much rope and it punishes the people who want to, to try to be the best that they can be or whatever.
Yeah, I have two things. One, I did play Magic Online a lot during those days. If you got paired against me and I was late to the round, it almost assuredly was because I was getting a sandwich. I did not watch replays.
$5 footlongs.
I mean, you know me, I'm very competitive, but I'm also like very happy to leave, equity on the table if I don't think it's worth it.
If it's your time disappearing.
I'm not one of the people who's like compelled to do this thing. Mm-hmm. And then the second is a lot of, games and even Wizards themselves have figured this out, and they try to like protect people from themselves. I mean, a good example that they haven't actually fixed is in Hearthstone Battlegrounds or Storybook Brawl, actually. Auto battlers, right? The fight happens automatically.
Yeah.
If you close the program during the fight and then restart it, they usually kick you back to the next buying phase.
Yeah.
And you get more time because you skip the fight because it doesn't replay the fight. Mm-hmm. So like you watch a Battleground streamer and they'll like, when they're short on time, like when they're like playing a very, APM actions per minute intensive build, there's even a program, an extension that someone made that automatically like firewalls Battlegrounds, and then you reopen it and you skip the fight and you get an extra 30 seconds in your shot.
Wow.
But that's miserable.
Yeah.
And I've seen people suggest, why don't they just put a button that lets you skip it? Because that way they wouldn't have to jump through these hoops. And it's like, no, because everyone would press the button.
Yeah.
That's actually worse. You'd skip watching the fight. Watching the fight's a fun part. It did the wrong hit. Oh, this.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to give people the option, because if people will always press the button that makes something 5% less fun in order for 1% more likely to win.
Yes.
And that's what these cards feel like. So I'm going to explain Specialized real quick. I'm going to steal your thunder.
Okay.
So Specialized cards, they are on the front side all a monocolored creature. I think they're literally all monocolored to start with.
I wrote out this beautiful paragraph, and you're going to just jump in with they're all monocolored. What about look at that first sentence? It's beautiful.
Beautiful, but I'm a little bit more efficient, I think. And
oh my God, I don't want you to. No, you don't get to do this.
Fine,
you're going to end up on some ramble, and it's going to be less efficient. Here, this is maximum efficiency on Specialized.
Maximum efficiency, but you just have to cut 30% of it. I don't care which 30%.
Okay, it's a combination of transform, which is like double face cards, and perpetual. You pay a specialized cost, which is usually some amount of generic mana, and then you name a color and discard a card that's either has that color in it or is a basic land that can make that color, and then it transforms perpetually or specializes into an augmented version of the original card, and you can only do it at sorcery speed. Now you can go.
Okay. So to give you an example of a card that I actually lost to, despite having it in my deck in a previous draft, because I didn't know what one of the faces did, you have Jaheira, Harper Emissary. It's 1 and a green. It's a 2/3. It's got hexproof from artifacts and enchantments. It has Specialized too. So then if you discard a black card or a swamp, it turns into a 3/4 that when it specializes, destroys an artifact or enchantment, and each opponent loses 3 life. That's actually what I lost to, them being able to nug me for 3.
Mm-hmm.
You turn it into the mono green version, you gain 4 life, it's a 3/4, kills an enchantment. All the versions are 3/4s. They all destroy an enchantment or artifact when you specialize. So like they at least were thinking like, okay, let's just make them all similar so you don't have to read as much. But it doesn't really help because they don't. First of all, some of them are still slightly different. This one is not, but some of them are. And then second, you still have to read the text to figure out what the rest of the card does because they all have these differences. So like the red one is you get a boon with when you cast your next creature spell, it gets perpetually +1/+0 haste. Mm-hmm. The blue one scries you 2. The white one puts a +1/+1 counter on something. So when your opponent casts Jaheira Harper Emissary, you are obliged, if you want to maximize your chances of winning the game, of looking at all 5 other versions, right? Yep. The 4 other colors plus the super green version, and figuring out what they do. I was playing against someone. I didn't realize the black one could make me lose 3 life. I made an attack. They flipped it, made me lose 3, attacked me, and I died. And sure, I could have read the card. But again, it's not fun if when my opponent, because there's a lot of these cards. This one's uncommon, mm-hmm. right? There's a ton of specialization cards or specialized cards in the set. It's not fun when your opponent plays a card to then have to read 5 cards. That's not a fun experience. That's not why we play Magic. There's too much text, like by so much. And the sick part is there's also cards in the set that just literally have a scroll bar of text. It's like reading terms and conditions. And they're not even a specialized card. They're just a card with like so many lines of text. It's like the reason to do digital mechanics is to do cool stuff like conjure or discover or, cool transforms. Like there's a lot of cool reasons to do that. It's not so you can get 3 text boxes worth of text on 1 card, or in this case, 6. That's
right.
not.
It's 6
That's not what
cards.
You're supposed to do with it.
Right. It's absolutely insane. Right. So go back to double face cards. Right. When those came out, it was like, oh, cool. It flips over into a different card. Right. And there was a tax to that of, well, now I need to know what that other card could become. And when we played with these when they originally in paper, you would ask, hey, can I see the other side? They started putting a little reminder about like the power and toughness of it at least, but. Some of them did something when they transformed, and some of them were just a different thing. And you would always have to be aware of that. So there was a tax to that. All of the double face cards were effectively 2 cards that you had to memorize as a player. They have just blown this out of the water because now they're not limited by the physical nature of a card being 2 dimensions and having 2 sides. You could have one of these that had 100 options, right? They decided to limit themselves by the number of colors in the game, but they could do it however they chose to do so. You, as the player of the card, may not need to know the ones that you can't, like, let's say your deck doesn't have any black cards or swamps in it. Well, then you can't make the green-black version of that card or whatever. Okay, so you don't have to know, but your opponent doesn't know that. They have to know every single possible outcome if they want to maximize on these things at all times, and there's 6 versions. I mean, even just the set review, ramifications of that are just absolutely absurd of having to explode out the complexity. And I'm honestly kind of shocked. Like, is this just like game designers run amok? Like, hey, here's a little bit of rope, and they're like, sweet, I don't have to only have 2 cards now. I could have this be 6 possible iterations.
Look, I just want to say that my opinion on these cards is not a personal attack on anyone who designed these cards.
Of course not.
I am extremely disappointed in the game design skills of the people who designed these cards. Like, I don't understand how you could think this was acceptable. I just don't. It's committing one of the biggest sins, which is it's not fun. This is not the fun part of Magic. Magic's already a complicated game. Magic with like core set, very light text boxes is still a very complicated game. And then now there's just like 6 cards on all these cards that you kind of have to know if you like. And some of them, I know this is a mythic rare, like Lucamina Moon Druid. It turns into 5 different things that do completely different things. That's not even close to similar. But even ones that like kind of mimic the same thing, like Will, Pact-Bound Duelist, when it specializes, you can sack a creature artifact, and then it has a bunch of different outputs. But those outputs really matter. One's an extra attack phase. One's getting back an instant or sorcery. you have to like, if you want to maximize, you have to play all these things, and not even just maximize. Let's say you're someone who doesn't want to like get every single edge, which is what most Magic players are. Fine, right? Your opponent plays a card. You see that it has like 5 faces. You're like, whatever. I'm not reading all that. I'm just going to play my game. But then they just flip it into something that kills you, and you could have played differently. You're going to feel stupid. Like on the board tricks are consistently one of the least kind of fun experiences in Magic. And there's a reason that at common, things that were like tap, prevent 2 damage stopped being printed, because it's really unfun. I remember this very vividly. I was playing Modern Masters in Vegas. It's the last round. We're playing for like not top 8, like top 32 or something. We have a good record. Mm-hmm. My opponent attacks with a 4/4. I block with like 2 3/3s, and then I tap my Saltfield Recluse to give their creature -2/-0. And they're like, look at it, and they realize they just have to bin their creature for no value into the thing on the board when there's 20 people watching. Yeah, not a pleasant experience. And even if it's literally just you on your computer, which I guess it is, because you're playing Alchemy, that doesn't mean you're going to have a good time, because this makes you feel stupid. It doesn't make you feel stupid if you attack, they block, and they cast Giant Growth, right? Mm-hmm. That happens all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, you didn't know they had a Giant Growth. And even if you're like super competitive and you're like, I'm going to try to play around everything, you could come to the conclusion that if they have Giant Growth, so be it, or, whatever. If you don't go all that distance and they have a card in hand, you don't feel dumb because they had a card in hand. You couldn't know about it. It's a game of unknown information. These specialized cards just don't do that. And it's just, I have found that to be like the consistently least fun part of the experience, because you are right. Specialized needing, being keyed to the card you discard, like discarding a forest or a red card or whatever, means that when you're playing red-green, you look and you have a red specialized card, you just have to know the red and the green versions. Right. You can ignore the rest. Your opponent can't. I don't know that they don't have a swamp in their deck or a blue card. Right. Like, how could I know that? Like, I played against someone who had only swamps and forests in play, and they specialized discarding a white card because they were just playing 3 colors. Yes. And that's a fine way to use your white card. Totally. It's actually great, because it's you've got a way to pitch it for value when you wouldn't be able to cast it. Go ahead. I don't know. It just strays so far from what I think is fun about Magic, and is really off-putting, that I'm just really confused as to how this happened, because they do a great job designing cards in general. They do a great job designing limited formats. There's a lot of really fun creative cards even in this set itself. How did this get out the door? I just don't understand. I would love to have it explained. Like, look, when you print a card that's too good, that's fine. You make cards that are too good. That can happen no matter how well you play test a set, because guess what? A design department or a design team of 12 people, even, which is a really fully stocked design team, plays less than the whole testing than the first hour when it's released in the public, in the first 20 minutes, honestly. Right. It's fine. You're going to miss on power level sometimes. I just don't understand, like, how many checks and balances this had to get through where people were like willing to give it a thumbs up and think like, yeah, this is a fun thing to do. We should put in front of our audience. Yeah, and it feels like something that is fun, but just is too much, right? But it's like way too much. It's not like a little too much. It's like, I mean, I'm looking at this Lucamina card, and it is ludicrous. Yes. Like, how much? I mean, one of the modes is a 4/4 Death Touch that has to be blocked. So it's like, oh, if you didn't realize that, then they're going to go ahead and make it and attack and eat your 3/3 or whatever. Yeah. And like, look, I even understand when some cards stray into the realm of too much complexity. That's easy trap to fall into. I've done it plenty of times myself when designing cards for various games, right? Designers get clever, they get designery, and that's like understandable. It's part of what's fun about the job, to be honest. But this isn't like we printed a double-faced card like the Strixhaven, school leaders or whatever, the deans, that were like 2 pretty complex cards, right, in the same card. Mm-hmm. And that was like, oh man, this is over the top. Like, why? This seems like too much. I'm surprised they did this. I remember thinking that. I even talked about it on the show probably. That's like, wow, these are just 2 from whole cloth different cards that are very complex. These are just like 6 cards. It's 6 cards. What's the end result here? Like, because I am curious. Like, there are some people who will really like all the complexity you can throw at them. There are, what ends up happening? Is this just a simple example of complexity creep pushing out newer players or intimidating people? A simple example, but simple is nowhere near this. But so there's a couple things. One, Cuneo, for example, Andrew Cuneo responded to me like, well, you can kind of ignore the specialized cards because most of them, they don't do anything. You don't have time to specialize. You can ignore that text. And it's like, yes, a lot of them like aren't to the point where like first of all, I don't really agree that you can ignore all of them to that degree. Second, like when they do matter, they matter a lot,
Like you can lose the game. And
some of them are pretty powerful. So like it is pretty relevant. Like one that you play against a lot is Rasad. It's a 2 and a white for a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, it exiles a creature until Rasad leaves the battlefield, right? Kind of banish or priest sort of thing. And 4 of the versions that you specialize into have a death trigger. Like the green one makes 2 boars when you die that are 2/2s. The blue one makes 2 1/1 flyers, right? Sure. Mm-hmm. But the white one does something completely different, which is when it specializes, the exiled creature, the opponent's creature that you tucked under Rasad, loses all abilities and becomes a 1/1.
And so, that's the most likely. Yeah, that's crazy.
That is also the most likely one because it's mono white. So what that means is for most of the abilities, if you have a removal, you'll get your creature back, but this one ability you won't. And it's like, yes, you have to know about that. Right. You're going to plan out your next turn. Like I remember playing against this card and I had a choice between ramping into a meteor golem or playing like a 5-drop of some kind. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I did actually read the card this time, and I'm like, oh, if I choose to play a ramp spell instead of a 5-drop, and then they just specialize into the white creature, my play is really bad here because I don't want to kill their creature anymore because I don't get anything back. I get a 1/1 no abilities back. So,
but that meant you needed to know what that specialized did.
So
right?
There's a couple things. One is that at this point, I will actually be fine drafting the set. Once I've gotten a bunch of drafts in, I'll just know what all these cards do. I'm very good at that. Right.
Yeah. That's actually difficult. One of your best strengths.
Like it's actually probably going to make me win more that these cards exist because I do know all the cards, both mine and theirs. And like, I'll know all the options, but a lot of people are going to have this reaction of you open a booster pack. First of all, on Arena, it does not explain what specialized on and you mouse over, right click the card, anything in your booster pack. I literally didn't know every part of the rules. So I had to like quickly, Google it to try to figure it out.
You had to Scryfall it just to.
Yes. And then, so there's people who are going to read that, whether they encountered it in a draft or just reading the cards in general and be like, wow, this set is not for me. And they'll just skip the set. And that's bad for Wizards because they want people to play their sets, but it's also bad for those people if the experience would have been fun, right? You're cutting someone off of a fun experience. And I mean, for some people, that's going to mean playing a different Magic set, but for some people, that's going to mean, booting up Hearthstone or just going to watch TV. And like, I don't know, Magic's really fun. I would rather more people play Magic.
Do you think that this affects newer players the most?
So it's actually kind of funny. I think there's a degree of newness where everything's so confusing that maybe this isn't that big of a deal, right?
Okay.
And you don't even necessarily always feel bad at that point that you could have done something different. Like if you lose, you lose, right? You're just kind of, the player who just looks at the cards on their side of the board, plays them out and just kind of sees what happens.
Woody?
I don't know how badly this impacts those people. I could believe some people have an unpleasant experience, but I could believe plenty of people in that camper. Wow, these cards are cool. I play D&D. I like this cards. I think it's cool that all these cards are D&D themed. I love D&D. I think the people it hurts the most are probably the people who are like, I don't really have the time or patience or desire to read all these cards, but I also am going to get frustrated when I get owned when I could have prevented it. Whereas the super spikes will just read all the cards and understand what's going on.
Okay. Yeah. So crazy mechanic that I wonder if we look back at this and go, okay, that was when they pushed it way too far with the, with the alchemy mechanics, and maybe they dial it back from there. We'll have to see how it plays out. There's 2 more mechanics to talk about. There's double team, which is if a creature with double team attacks, if it's not a token, you conjure, again, make a new card into your hand, a copy of it, and they both lose double team. So that's pretty cool, actually, right? Like that's a straightforward.
I actually love this mechanic. I think this is a really cool mechanic. So like at your base level, you've got things like 3 mana, 2/2 menace. Then when it attacks, you get another 3 mana, 2/2 menace in your hand. And now they both lose that ability and they're just like 3 mana, 2/2 menaces, really clean. And then there's some that like stack well, like the Genasi Rabble Rousers is I think a really, really cool card. It's one of my favorite. It's 1 in a red, 1/3 with double team. And it has the ability of 1 in a red, all Genasi Rabble Rousers you control get +1/+0 until end of turn.
Oh, very nice. Yeah,
I was able to set up a really cool board where I had 3 of them once, and it just like, kind of went over the top.
See, that's really cool. And that's a neat thing that you would have a hard time doing in paper. So there's obviously still room. Last one is not a full-on mechanic, but it is another cool thing that you can do on digital. It's called a boon, and it's a digital only way to represent like a delayed trigger. Like you know how if you have a trigger that says something like, whenever you cast your next spell, there's kind of a thing waiting for you to do that, but we don't really have a way in the game to represent like that. There's not like a card or a thing that you can do that says, hey, I have a thing that says whenever I do my next spell, you just have to sort of know that it's there. Even though on Arena, they do use the kind of emblem space for this, but like in Paper, we don't have anything. And, you know, one of the reasons that they don't do that, or that the longest that we have is basically like until the end of this turn, you know, this effect lasts or whatever, is that it's too hard for people to keep tracking indefinitely. Hey, did you ever have the next spell from that 3 turns ago? I don't know. Did we trigger it? They just say, look, it's only this turn. With digital, it's like, hey, we don't need to have that barrier. And they made a thing called a boon that shows you what you have waiting for you. Once the effect of the boon triggers, it just goes away. So that's pretty cool. I mean, that is to me a benefit that you could say, hey, whenever you cast your next instant, something good happens. And now it just sits over there. And if that happens in 3 extra turns from now, fine. Then that's great. You knew both players can see it, that there's a boon waiting to happen. And when it triggers, it's gone. One interesting thing that I don't know, can you confirm this from your experience, Luis? I read a thing on like a wiki, like an MTG wiki thing. And it said that the 5 rebalance cards, which again, one of them's from AFR, it's Sepulchre Ghoul, which is now a 2/2 instead of a 2/1. Otherwise, it does the same stuff. And then 4 cards from the Commander Legends set. It says that both versions are in the set.
So like there's a 2-mana 2/1 Sepulchre Ghoul and a 2-mana 2 Sepulchre Ghoul with the same art in the same set.
It says that as a note. I can't imagine that that's true or that I'm interpreting that correctly, but like, why would they do that? Right? That just seems bizarre.
I don't know the answer, and I refuse to believe they're both in packs at the same time.
Okay, I don't think so either.
I will literally lose my mind if that's the case. Yeah. I cannot believe that's the case.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I'm misinterpreting.
If somehow that is the case, let me know, I guess, on Twitter. But like,
I'm just going to proceed on Twitter.
I'm going to proceed with that not being the case because that's just a bridge too far. I can't. We don't have time for that.
Just be bizarre. Yeah. All right, let's talk archetypes here. We'll go just broad strokes.
I do want to say before we get to archetypes,
sure.
So I'm not. Like, I actually do enjoy playing the set. I'm going to do more drafts. I'm not drafting right now, I'll have you know, but I want to finish the draft I'm in. Specialized cards are just like, they obviously like set me off, and for all the reasons I described, but I don't want that to be confused with, I think the set's crap or I hate the set. And I even try not to be an overly negative person in general. It's just, this is something I feel passionate about. I'm a student of game design, you know, I have a lot left to learn, I'm sure. And, you know, I'm continue to get better as it's one of the things I work at. And I look at this and it's hard for me to like not express my opinion here.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm glad you did. And, you know, that is part of what one of your strengths as the co-host on the show. And I think that people recognize that listen to the show for a long time that, you know, you're not a hot take person. You're not looking to pop off. So if you do, you actually mean it. So there you go. Let's get into some of this stuff because some of these decks look really cool for the archetypes. The blue-white deck is Flicker. And I'll read the signpost uncommon, of which there are some for most of these archetypes. I'm a little confused about that too, but this one's OG, the Exquisite Blade, 2 blue-white for a 2/3 legendary human monk and uncommon. And when it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and scry 2. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, exile up to 1 target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So that's awesome. I mean, that kind of tells the whole tale right there. And blue-white blink or flicker is one of my favorite sub-archetypes that they use. They usually save it for like master sets and stuff like that, but it looks like they busted it out here. And this is, I don't know if you have experience drafting it, but this is going to be one of the first places that I try to draft because I love these archetypes, right?
I haven't specifically drafted blue-white, but Blur, the tuna blue, you know, blink a creature, draw a card, instant comment. I had a sick blue-green deck that I'm still playing with a bunch of ETBs, and it's really sweet.
So there you go. So so if you're going to draft blue-white, you want to look for ETB creatures specifically. That's kind of where you want to be. OG, of course, is a good place to start because it has an ETB ability of its own that's relevant. Scry 2, gain 2 life. If you can just keep doing that over and over, it adds up really quickly and is very powerful. But, you know, anything that gets you, the premiums tend to be drawing cards or disrupting your opponent's board, bouncing, killing, neutralizing threats on the other side. But, you know, any type of value you can get from these are great. And then that common you mentioned, of course, is going to be one of the keys. Blue-black, I don't really know how to describe it. I looked it up from Wizards, and they said it was control the battlefield and sneak creatures in. So they put Kreidel of Baldur's Gate from AFR in here. This is the blue-black 1/3. And when it deals combat damage to a player, that player loses 1 life and mills a card, and you gain 1 life and scry 1. And whenever you attack, you may pay 2. If you do, target creature can't be blocked this turn. So Kreidel is really kind of excels at getting specific creatures in, for maybe not huge chunks of damage, but for some type of value. So it looks like, I don't think that they actually put ninjutsu in here, but it has kind of hit you with my little creatures vibes here.
Yeah, and blue-black has that, and there's some various graveyard effects, and there's a like a zombify sort of thing that you could also end up using, like the self mill, put stuff in your graveyard, bring it back, or get value of stuff in your graveyard. Blue-black plays into that.
Mm-hmm. So there you go. So look for creatures that benefit from hitting the opponent. Anything like that would be where you'd want to be. Next is black-red, and it's treasures with Kalain back in effect. Reclusive Painter. This is the black-red 1/2, and when Kalain enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. Other creatures you control enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on them for each mana from a treasure spent to cast them. Now, Kalain was an absolute all-star in AFR. Curious to see if it's as supported in this set, however. It really does depend on how many treasures you can make. Kalain was powerful on its own because it made a treasure, and that gave you the combination of ramping, but also fixing if you needed it, but also getting the counter from it. And that's a pretty easy 2-drop Kalain. Then on turn 3, play a 4-drop, and it gets a counter. You always were in the driver's seat if you were able to pull that off. And I am curious to see how supported the treasure mechanic is in this set, because, if you start off with a couple of Kalains, I like your chances just based on what we saw before.
Yeah, red-black is great. As a spoiler, red and black are, I think, still the 2 best colors, and there's a lot of support for this. And just, Kalain's a powerful card. Treasure matter stuff tends to be pretty good, and red and black still are very, very good. This is not completely different from AFR, right? It's a lot of the same cards, so didn't mean everything was going to be the same, and it's not. But red and black still the 2 best color pair. Yeah,
and as you said, literally it's the same. Jaded Sellsword, Unexpected Windfall, improvised weaponries in this set. Like it, if you like the stuff that was doing there, you'll probably like it here too. Red green, kind of funny. There's a recurring dragons theme, and in fact 3 of the different color pairs have dragons as their theme, so clearly they wanted dragons to be part of the landscape here. Red green is definitely a dragon centric color pair. It's called, the signpost uncommon is called Thrakus the Butcher, and it is 3 red green for a 3/4 legendary dragon peasant. At uncommon is a trampler, and it says whenever Thrakus the Butcher attacks, double the power of each dragon you control until end of turn. So that's a proper hard hitter there. Nice 4 toughness. Doesn't have flying.
No, there's a bunch of non-flying dragons in the set. I like the dragon theme, by the way. It's going to be, part of 3 different color pairs, like you mentioned. It shows up at common in a good way, and a bunch of the dragons have adventure. So, and I really like adventure cards. I think that's a great mechanic. So the dragon theme seems pretty cool.
Okay, so there you go. I don't really know what else to say about it. Green-white, life gain, Trelisara Moon Dancer's back. That's green-white 2/2 for a legendary elf cleric, and whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on it and scry 1. Great little payoff there. We see a lot of different ways to gain life in the set. The real question is, what are the payoffs? Trelisara will surely be one of the better ones, but I would 100% prioritize payoffs if possible, before looking for cards that gain life. And of course, ideally you want cards that affect the board while gaining you life, rather than just being more on the gain life only side of things.
Yeah, I haven't been impressed with what I've seen out of life gain stuff. There is a lot of random life gain tacked on, including the Scale Nurture, the O2 that taps for a green, but if you use that mana on a dragon, you gain 2 life as a kind of recurring life gain / ramp card, which is really nice. So I do like that card in general, and it would fit well into green-white. I just not a huge believer in the life game theme.
Yeah, you really need payoffs. If you get them, then usually for supported sets, it's easy to gain the life. It's just hard to get the payoff. Red blue dragons again. This one's Lozon Dragon's Legacy. This one's 3 blue red for a 4/2 flying legendary dragon shaman. Whenever you cast an adventure or dragon spell, Lozon deals damage to that spell's equal to that spell's mana value to any target that isn't a commander.
Yeah, I don't know about all that, but
but it's any target then, right? And for our purposes, it just can hit anything.
I guess that's just as a way to use a card from the commander set that also plays well here.
That seems really powerful to me.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, all the adventure dragon cards play really nicely into this. And even just casting dragons, like dragons are expensive. When you cast this, you're just frequently going to deal tons of damage. So obviously if this thing survives and you have anything else to back it up, it's really good.
Right. So I blue-red dragons is a new thing. You know, that isn't a typical color pair for that, but there you go. If you end up in green-black, you guessed it, Reanimator / graveyard stuff. Kaga Shadow Archdruid is the signpost. It's 2 green-black for a 1/4 legendary elf druid. And whenever it attacks against Death Touch until end of turn and you mill 2 cards, once during each of your turns, you may play a land or cast a permanent spell from among the cards in your graveyard that were put there from your library this turn.
So another more graveyard theme. And one of the things I think the set does fairly well is a lot of overlapping themes. Of course, all the teamer colors, blue, red, red, green, blue, green have the same theme, which kind of helps, right? Because it means that those all are naturally synergistic. But having black, green and blue, black having decent graveyard stuff, I mean, it's more concentrated in black, green, but it will kind of overlap and touch in the same way. So I do like that. And this card is quite strong.
Next one is red, white double team, which I guess I did find a card, Liara of the Flaming Fist, which didn't show up in my other thing for some reason, but it's red, white for a 2/2 legendary human soldier. At the beginning of each combat, each creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn if it has the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard. And you can pay 1 red, white to have another target non-token creature you control gain first strike and double team until end of turn, activate as a sorcery and activate only once. That seems like a hammer.
Yeah, and like I said, the double team mechanic's really cool, and there's some cool stuff with Perpetual that can really help, and some kind of neat tricks. One trick that you have to use full control mode with is you attack with a double team creature, and the ability goes in the stack, but before it resolves, you blink it or return it to your hand, with like the various blink or bounce effects. You'll get the copy of the creature in your hand, but the original will not lose the double team ability. So I did this with a red-white deck where I attacked with the Genasi 1/3. In response to the trigger, played the 2-mana 2/2 flash that returns a creature to your hand, got another Genasi, then just played those 2 Genasi, and then I was even going to get another one the next turn when I attacked.
Very nice. This didn't work. Okay. The next one is white-black, which is leaves the battlefield matters.
Yeah, so kind of more blink stuff. And again, this is what I'm talking about with like the extra backup where red-black has sack stuff, right? And white and blue-white has blink. And then white-black has things that work with both sack and blink.
Right. And that's usually a good place to start for, having those overlapping mechanics for like a healthy format can be really good. The card is apparently Minthara of the Absolute, which is 2 white-black for a 2/4 legendary elf cleric with starting intensity 0. Creatures you control get +X+0.
Let me just say it's a bad sign when the first line of text is starting intensity 0. That is not something that sparks joy in me to like figure out what's going on.
It might not get below 0 or above 0. Creatures you control get +X+0, where X is Minthara of the Absolute's intensity. Whenever one or more permanents you control leave the battlefield, perpetually increase Minthara's intensity and the intensity of cards named Minthara of the Absolute in your hand, library, and graveyard by 1. This ability triggers only once each turn. So it pumps up your creatures by that, and then it rewards you for having things leave the battlefield.
Yeah, you could also just not have this work with other copies of it and save some text. But again, the set's clearly designed from the perspective of like more text is actually good.
Right.
So might as well get a little more in there. Yeah, I haven't really played against white black. I don't really know how that plays out, but I'm sure it plays out fine.
Okay. Last one is blue-green, which is, that's right, dragons again. This is Corlessa Scale Singer as a signpost. It's blue-green for a 1/4 legendary dragon bard. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast dragon spells from the top of your library.
So I really like blue-green. I just like the green-based decks for the reason that there's a lot of good fixing and ramp. So you end up in a spot like there's Underseller Myco, and it's just awesome. It's two and a green for a 1/2, and it taps for any color of mana. And when it enters the battlefield or leaves the battlefield, you get a 1/1 Saproling. So it's a 5-color fixer that also provides like a pretty massive amount of value. So I think it's a very cool card, and one that plays really well with basically all of these themes while, supporting them all very well. And just being a powerful card in its own right. You've got the Scaled Nurture that taps for a green and you gain 2 when you cast a dragon spell with it. And then at common, we've kind of finished the archetypes. I want to talk about a few couple cards just because this is like the 6th archetype or 11th archetype of 5-color green. You've got Prophetic Prism and Pilgrim's Eye, which both fix 5 colors, as well as a Bronze Walrus at uncommon. That's a 3-mana 2/2 ETB scry 2 and tap for a mana of any color. And Navigation Orbit uncommon, 3-mana artifact, 2 tap, sack it, go get 2 basic lands or gates, put 1 on the battlefield, 1 in your hand. So like a lot of ways to fix 5 colors here, and there's a lot of good gold cards to pay you off for doing that.
Man, so any individual cards that you want to tackle?
Yeah, one is it bugs me. I mean, I played against this. It's the Hourglass Coven. It's a 4 black for a 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield, you draft 2 cards from its spellbook and put them into play. But the thing is, what the spellbook is, it's a bunch of different warlocks that all do different things. But the crazy part is, it all has the same picture, every single card. So what you end up with is they're at least all 3/3s, or no, they're at least they're all 2/2s, but they're 3/3s because the original Hourglass Coven gives all warlocks +1/+1, but all other ones. But what you end up with is 3/3s with the same art with 3 different abilities, or sometimes only 2 different abilities because you chose the same one twice. You're able to, but it's pretty relevant which ones you mess with. I don't know. It's just crazy that they'll have 3 cards in play with the same art that all do different things. That's just like a really weird situation to be in.
Strange. Yeah.
A card I really like, Thayan Invokers. It's tuna blue for a 1/1 with double team. It's a blue rare. So when it attacks, you get another copy of it without double team. And when it enters the battlefield, you conjure a lightning bolt into your hand and discard a card. And it gets a +1/+1 counter whenever you conjure a card. So you play this. You get to turn your worst card in your hand into a lightning bolt, and it's a 2/2. And then when you attack, you get another one, which conjures another bolt and pumps them both. And you
just get these lightning bolts that, like, just stacking up in your hand.
Oh yeah, they are straight up lightning bolts too. You have to be playing blue-red in order to cast them.
Oh, that's really sweet.
I mentioned Underseller Myconid. I think that card it plays out really well. Hook Horror is another cool one. It's a 4 and a black for a 3/3 at common. And when it dies, it perpetually gets -1/-1, and then returns to the battlefield under your control. And it doesn't do this once its toughness hits 0. So it's a 3/3 that dies into a 2/2 that dies into a 1/1 that then just doesn't come back.
Okay, I like
really
that.
Cool
I like those
card
type
with
of
like
cards.
sack stuff. So Goblin Trapfinder, the one we mentioned at the start of the show, right? Red for a 1/1, and then when it dies, you seek a creature with mana value 3 or less. It gains haste, costs 2 less to cast, but then dies end of turn.
Mm-hmm.
The natural combo with this is double team. So what I was able to set up earlier, where I had a deck with three trap finders or 2 trap finders and 3 rabble rousers. I trap found into a rabble rouser. So then now I have a 1-mana 1/3 haste. When it attacks, I get another copy of it, but without all the perpetual text. It just copies the base version. But because it's a rabble rouser, I was able to set up a turn because I had so many in my deck where I had like 3. I played a haste one, attacked with 3 of them, and then was able to pump all 3 of them, with 1 ability each turn. So the trap finder and the rabble rouser work really nicely together. as does the Trap Finder with other double team cards. This is the kind of synergies I live for.
Yeah, really you cool. Love this stuff.
Incessant Provocation is another cool one. This is a 3 and a red threaten, right? You gain control of a creature, untap it, it gains haste until end of turn. But it also perpetually gains this creature attacks each combat if able.
Oh.
So in the red-black sack deck, you can play this, steal their creature, sack it, right? All good.
Mm-hmm.
But what I like about this is in an aggro deck, imagine your opponent's under the gun, you've pressured them. They play like a 4/4 owlbear. You're like, steal the owlbear, attack you with everything.
Mm-hmm.
They live through the turn. They get their owlbear back, but now you're at 20. They have to attack you with the owlbear. It's no longer a blocker.
Totally. That's awesome. How much does that cost?
3 and a red. It's a really cool way for Threaten to play out. And I already mentioned Blur, but
super cool.
I like Blur as a blink card. So I don't have the most experience with this set yet. I certainly haven't drafted all the archetypes. And so far I've been really enjoying like the green-based multicolor ones. Though that red-white double team deck was pretty fun that I was able to draft as well.
Mm-hmm.
The games have played out pretty well. It's kind of like a AFR in the sense that there's like a decent amount of like mid-rangey stuff and some amount of board stalls. But honestly, I think the format's much improved. I like this more than AFR. The addition of adventure cards, the dragon theme plays out a lot better than it did in AFR, though it has a lot of the same dragons. They added a bunch of new ones and some payoffs, and I think that works out. And honestly, like once you get around the like card text reading sort of thing, which is a big thing, I'm not obviously sweeping that under the rug. You've seen my thoughts on that. I think the specialized cards are fun to play once you know everything that's going on. It's the knowing everything that's going on part that I think is pretty troublesome.
Yeah, I think there's two things. Well, one, let's do a quick crack a pack. We'll kind of cruise through it. And then but the thing I want to say is that, like, I mean, as much as we're down on some of the decisions with the design stuff, I mean, this does benefit us. I mean, I like complex formats, right? I like stuff that goes super deep and that gives me like long-term replayability. Like this is probably going to be a sweet set for us. I mean, I want to talk about it next week after I've got a bunch of drafts, but
arena player, I think this set has some cool stuff going on and has legs. Like you're going to get value out of it. But
it's just a little worrisome.
I mean, to give you some context, I was drafting on Discord and some of my friends were hanging out watching and like they kind of lost interest because it's like you mouse over a card or you right click on a card and 6 versions are there, or you cycle through those versions. It's like, I'm not going to play this set enough to clear this bar of learning all this, what's going on. We're going to go back to playing something else instead.
So they'll just because it does have too high of a bar. All right, let's do the crack a pack real quick and then we'll call it a show. I've got one ready. It's a draft that I just fired right now. First up is what I assume will be a very important card. It's Pilgrim's Eye. That's 3 mana, 1/1 flyer. When it ETBs, you can search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle.
Not a bad place to start. I mean, I'd hope to do better, but I do like the card a lot.
Yeah, I do too. Next is Underseller Myconid. So it's 2 and a green for a 1/2 fungus. And when it enters a battlefield or dies, you make a 1/1 green sapperling, and it taps to add 1 mana of any color. That's the one you were just talking about, right?
Yeah, I really like that card. I think that card is excellent. Like, there's a good chance we take that card out of this pack.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Knoll Hunter is next. That's the 1 and a green 2/2 with pack tactics. Whenever it attacks, if you attacked with creatures with power totaling 6 or greater this combat, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Meh.
Mediocre. Not I think what green is about in the set.
Yeah. Next is Faraday's Fireball. That's the 3 red instant. And it deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker, and then you roll a d20. If it's a 1 through 9, it does 2 damage to each player. If it's a 10 through 20, it does 2 damage to each opponent.
Yeah, mediocre removal that's got an aggressive bent. Wouldn't be interested in this.
Yeah, same. Manticore, this is the 3 and a black 2/1 flash flying with tail spikes. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature and opponent controlled that was dealt damage this turn.
Like another mediocre card.
Yeah, they're all kind of not great here. Grim Bounty, there we go. 2 black for a sorcery, destroy target creature or planeswalker, create a treasure.
All right, we're not taking the Myconid after all. I would take Grim Bounty over that.
Yeah, good solid removal spell. Young Blue Dragon is 4 and a blue for a 3/3 dragon. It also has Sand Augury, which is an adventure sorcery. You can scry 1 and draw a card, and if you don't, it's a 3/3 flying 4 and a blue.
Oh, I like this card. It's good in a ramp deck.
Yeah.
Not as good as Grim Bounty, of course.
Okay, yep. Contact Other Plane, that's the 3 and a blue. Instant, roll a d20. If it's a 1 through 9, you draw 2 cards. If it's 10 through 19, you scry 2, then draw 2 cards. And if it's a 20 ball, you scry 3, then draw 3.
I think this is still pretty mediocre. There's a lot of ways to get card advantage. This is not the way to do it.
Yeah, that's how I see it too. Next is Guardian Naga. This is 5 white for a 5/6 adventure creature. You can pay 2 and a blue to Banishing Coils, which is an instant.
White, right?
2 and a white, which is an instant. Exile target artifact or enchantment. If you don't, it's the 5 white 5/6 Vigilance. As long as it's your turn, prevent all damage that would be dealt to Guardian Naga. So you get to slam with it freely.
I think it's okay, but I don't think it's, particularly great. I don't think white generally wants the 7-mana plays, and having a disenchant is fine, but this isn't one of those formats where disenchant's amazing.
Yeah. Dawnbringer Cleric. This is the 1 and a white 1/3. When it enters the battlefield, you choose 1. You can gain 2 life, destroy an enchantment, or exile a card from a graveyard.
Mediocre. I mean, it's if you care about life gain a lot, it can be good, but it's just not amazing.
Okay. That brings us to our uncommons. First one is Wild Shape. That's green for an instant. Choose 1 until end of turn. Target creature you control has that base power and toughness, becomes that creature type, and gains that ability of 1/3 turtle with hexproof, 1/5 spider with reach, or a 3/3 elephant with trample.
Yeah, not mediocre combat trick like it was the first time.
Right. It never actually caught on really. Next is Sea Tower Imprisonment. This is 2 white for an enchantment aura. Enchant a creature or planeswalker you don't control. When it enters the battlefield, conjure a card named Soldiers of the Watch onto the battlefield, and enchanted permanent can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. And Soldiers of the Watch is a 1 and a white 2/1 with double team, I think.
Yeah, our buddy Sirkovitz has been calling this sleep with 2 soldiers because it's like a sleep. It locks down their creature and you get 2 soldiers out of it. I don't know if he's aware of like the connotations of that, but this card is, I think better than Grim Bounty. It's an arrest that also gets you a soldier that gets you another soldier. It's a 3-for-1 if all goes according to plan.
Yeah, and those are all relevant. So that's
and you
very,
get the best
very
one
strong.
up front.
Yeah. So would that be your pick here so far?
Definitely.
Okay. And then Pegasus Guardian is next, 5 and a white for a 3/3 flying Pegasus. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, create a 1/1 white Pegasus creature token with flying. But it's also a adventure creature, Rescue the Foal. It's 1 and a white for an instant. Exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Wow, that seems great for the Blink deck, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the card's a little too expensive to be good. I'm not a huge fan of it.
Okay. Man, I like it. Just if you're in that deck, at least. And then our rare is called Kindred Discovery. It is an enchantment for 3 blue. And it says, as Kindred Discovery enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, draw a card. That's a pretty extreme build around.
Yeah, it's got a lot of potential action there, but I would just take, sleep with 2 soldiers as Sea Tower Imprisonment.
I like Sea Tower Imprisonment here, and I even took it. So there you go. All right, let's call it a show. As much as we had to say about this, I am excited to try it. I really am. I haven't drafted it yet until right now. But next week I'll be able to talk about it. I'll get a bunch of drafts in, and we'll talk about how it actually plays out. It'll be kind of a cool experiment because obviously, we have some words to say about some of the design decisions, but let's just see if it's an awesome format too, and maybe we can learn something from that as well. So we will come back next week with more information about how this actually plays out. And we'd love to hear from you as well on Twitter. If you want to let us know, hey, this is actually really fun, or no, this is really a lot and I probably won't draft it that much. I'm curious. What do you think? I'm Marshall_LR over there, and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. And you can remember to support our sponsors, Channel Fireball and FTX. We do thank them for their continued support of the show. That's going to do it for this one. We'll be back. We'll be talking more Alchemy Horizons Baldur's Gate next week. We'll see you then.
All right. So, Marshall, are you familiar with the trolley problem?
Yeah, I saw this thing that where you like pick between, you're forced to make decisions between two kind of bad outcomes or whatever. Yeah.
So this is a kind of a long standing kind of philosophical exercise, a theory exercise. And the setup is such: there's a trolley barreling down the tracks, right? Like a train. Mm-hmm. I know not everyone knows what a trolley is, I guess. There's the track it's on, and then there's another track. And you, the bystander, have a lever. You can pull the lever. If you do, it switches tracks. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the setup. And so one of the classic questions is: there's a trolley barreling down the tracks, and there's 5 people tied to the track. You can't do anything else. Remember, this is a hypothetical. You're taking these things are immutable, right? For every trolley problem, unless it's specified otherwise, the setup is it's going to kill all 5 people on those tracks, or you can pull the lever and it'll only kill one person. Mm-hmm. And first of all, what would you do in that scenario?
I would kill one person.
So you'd pull the lever. So you would take a direct action. Some people would argue by taking an action, you're actually complicit in killing that person. Whereas if you just let things happen the way they were, you are not. You're neutral, right? That's kind of like part of the interesting part of the setup, right? Uh-huh. And all right, so what if the trolley is barreling down the tracks? It's gonna hit the Mona Lisa, but you can pull the lever and it'll run someone over.
Oh, I'd let it hit the Mona Lisa.
All right. What if it'll hit the Mona Lisa, or on the other track is a person who's willingly tied themselves there to save the Mona Lisa? Would you let them sacrifice themselves to save the Mona Lisa? There are unquestionably many people in this world who would sacrifice themselves to save the Mona Lisa. That's
really interesting. I would. If I knew that they made that choice, then I wouldn't want to be the one to tell them that they can't make that choice.
Okay.
I would feel really bad about it, and I'd be like, man, I hope you didn't regret that, like right as the train was about to hit you. But
the trolley's barreling down the tracks. Marshall, you're tied to the tracks, but you can reach the lever. There's another person you don't know on the other track. Would you pull the lever to save yourself?
I think I would.
Okay.
I'm not proud of that. I think there's a lot of decisions that I would make that have me sacrificing myself, but I think in the moment I would probably panic and pull the lever.
Okay. Same situation. You're on the tracks. You got the lever. It's barreling towards you. On the other track, there's 4 clones of you.
They're me, but they're just other me's?
They're clones of you. You've been perfectly cloned.
Yeah, they're gone. I'll take the real deal.
I tend to agree with that because your natural impulse is to kill your clones anyway. So this is kind of all upside.
Yeah, nobody likes that guy anyway.
All right. It's barreling down the track. Kevin Durant is tied to the track.
Oh, he's like one of my favorite basketball players.
But he just signed with the Phoenix Suns. On the other track.
Oh my God.
On the other track, you have to pull the lever to make this outcome. It's LeBron James. He's tied to the tracks. He's just signed with the Brooklyn Nets.
I love LeBron James. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, KD. Sorry, buddy. You should have stuck with me on my Nets. Yeah, I'm getting LeBron and I'm getting rid of KD.
This also answers the question of why I was asking you who your favorite basketball players were and what your favorite teams were.
This makes a lot more sense. Boy, I wish I wouldn't have answered now. This was too hard. I killed KD today.
All right. The trolley's barreling down the track. In its path, a delicious burrito. Ooh. However, if you pull the lever, it'll run over 3 unopened packs of Cons of Tarkir. You get to collect whatever remains.
I want the burrito. I'll kill the packs.
All right. Last one, Marshall. Highest stakes. The trolley's barreling down the tracks. On the track that it's going to hit is paper magic. However, if you pull the lever, it instead destroys limited magic.
Oh my God. You're cruel. This is not nice. I think I would destroy limited.
All right.
It would hurt too many people to lose paper magic. Like too many friendships would go away for me to sleep at night as much as I love drafting. God, that was brutal, man.
All right. Well, you're just lucky I didn't make a multi-track problem with all the LR co-hosts, but we'll save that for next time. Sorry, John.
Yeah.